Hey everyone, this is Val. I'm leading the Open Innovation Labs in EMEA, and I have the honor to host this panel with a lot of interesting people coming from different parts of Europe to share their experiences and thoughts about culture, leadership, and driving change. It's an amazing opportunity to really talk to all of you. We bring different perspectives from major transformations, with culture being the common denominator between all of those. And it's no wonder that culture nowadays is such a high topic on the agenda of many executives, but there's little being said on what exactly it means, how does it materializes, what people can do about it. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation to make it a bit more actionable for people to understand what they can start doing today for their teams, for their organizations. So I would like to start with a quote from Niels Flegging, a management thinker that I really admire and follow. He has that saying that culture is like a shadow, is the result of things we do. So with this, I'll go and quickly introduce all of you in alphabetical order, starting with Antti. So Antti, we met a couple of years ago when you were working for a Finnish insurance company and passionately driving transformation, looking for how to change the ways of working and the ways you were using technology to transform the organization. So you had this kind of semi-architect, semi-cloud native development advocate, semi-new ways of working advocate. It feels like you've really walked a long way from back then. So here's the first question for you. How has your work life changed, especially if you think in the cultural aspects of work, the focus on outcomes over outputs, impact-driven leadership, leading with purpose and passion and transparency? How did this have an impact on you and your career?
Well, thanks for asking. I'm feeling that this is like not just one question, but let me try to answer that. Of course, one of the biggest changes is that I'm no longer an architect. I'm now working with people and way of working full time. So I kind of found my passion, or really crystallized what I really want to do. Instead of focusing on everything at once, I kind of found that if we do not get people aspects right, then none of the process and technology stuff matters. So that is probably the biggest change that has happened so far, or since 2 years ago. Thanks.
We also have Christian. Christian, you an agile coach and release train engineer at Volkswagen, especially Volkswagen R&D, which is a slightly different thing. It's a very interesting part of the organization. We've been working together with your team, which is such an amazing team, and you actually represent the full team here. Not everyone could join today. You're helping multiple teams in your work, so you're trying to bring the best out of them while developing a really complex car software testing platform. And together with your colleagues and the chief product owner there, you, in my point of view, you're not just changing the ways of working in the teams. You are potentially going to transform the value stream of car software development. So it's really, really interesting to have you here and hear your perspectives. Let me start with a question for you. Where does your passion for driving transformation come from?
Thank you very much for the kind introduction, Val. Really appreciate it. So where does my passion come from? I'm a big fan of using the right tool for the right task. And I firmly believe that the classical project management approach has its place in complicated projects like building bridges, building houses, stuff that are very complicated but somehow plannable. But R&D is a complex type of project with its own constraints, its own problems, lots of people that need to come together and not just coming together on one single point, but on multiple points with multiple interfaces. And I think agile methods, agile thinking, agile project management fits exactly the challenge and way better than classical project management. So I'm trying to drive us in that direction.
Thanks. It will be an interesting discussion. And moving over to Jonas. Jonas, you bring yet another interesting perspective. We met about a year and a half ago, and you had that super interesting challenge as a product owner for diagnostic and support applications. You were looking to build a new team, a new long-lived product team that was supposed to bring back the development of some of those products in-house after a few years of outsourcing. Your business was very demanding, and they were looking for ever shorter lead times to market, to accommodate for change, to really respond faster to the changing needs of the market. So today, you've grown from that one team to multiple teams that are actually delivering business value continuously. So it's really interesting to hear your perspective of growth. And here's a question to start with. If there's one thing that made you successful in this growing from one to multiple teams and increasing their maturity, what would that be?
Yeah, hi Val. I think just mentioning one thing will probably be difficult, but I will do my best. And I think really what's been the key thing is to let the team decide as much as possible. I mean, part of my role as a leader is really to make sure that they have enough knowledge so that they feel comfortable to take the decision. But overall, all decisions taken by the team itself are better. I mean, partly because they usually know best. But it's also because of the engagement that comes with having taken the decision themselves. I mean, they will make sure to make it work and complete it if they decided to do it themselves. But I also think my team has been really open to sharing their way of working. I mean, we have had people visiting us. People have been part of our sprint plannings, impact mapping, retros. I made a talk at an all-employee meeting about the team. And I think the actual people visiting our one team, which I started off with, I mean, there's really no substitute to actually seeing it live. And people can literally see the difference and feel it as well. I mean, there's a different atmosphere, different energy. There's also sort of a different kind of relaxed and very honest setting from the developers. And I think when people feel that and see basically how cool work can be, I mean, they naturally want to change and be a part of that as well. I think that enabled me to be able to scale this to now 7 teams instead.
Amazing. Thanks for your answer, Jonas. And then moving to Sol. So you're product leader responsible for a very big portfolio of products. Probably some of them we cannot talk about here because of the background and the essence. But it's really interesting to see you adopting new ways of working. And if I can say, based on our conversations and exchange, you are somebody who sees adopting new ways of working as a really important, as a critical part of the business transformation, something required to drive this new development, product development using cloud native technologies. Why do you think that modern cloud-native product development requires different ways of working, essentially a different culture?
Yeah, hi Val. Thanks for that. So I suppose there were many reasons why we needed to change in the first place. So this sort of came from our customers. who are demanding, cloud native solution or cloud solutions, and also from within the business to be a cloud agnostic move. So we also wanted to move away from more sort of traditional project-based delivery cycles and move into more of a product-based and focus on what were our core services. So part of this move included the move to more of a DevOps environment, adopting continual integration and continual deployment methodologies so that we could actually be a lot more responsive to our customers. But also, once we've delivered solutions, to actually then continually improve and develop those further. And also a slight change into sort of how we price things, so move more towards value-based pricing rather than, with project-based approach, more sort of cost-based. So all of this really meant that we needed to change the way we worked across the board. OpenShift obviously gave us some of the technologies that helped us, so provides the platform, the technical tools, and some of the pipelines to help change the way we work. But really by adopting that sort of cloud native approach meant that we could actually become more agile and actually live that sort of agile way of working with the sort of tools that you get within the DevOps pipeline, allowing us to be a lot more responsive and sort of continually improve. So I think the change in the ways of working certainly has been one of the biggest successes since our experience in the Innovation Lab engagement. The adoption of some of the practices promoted within the lab and elsewhere, certainly the Open Practice Library and sort of living within the Mobius loop of the delivery framework of discovery, the options, the delivery practices, and the sort of underpinning of those solid cultural and technical foundations have been a revelation. I don't think it's anything particularly new, but put in the right context, has been incredibly powerful for us.
Thanks for the comprehensive answer. Amazing. Well, all of you kind of touched on the leadership side of things, so that might be a good transition to our next question. And to repeat the quote that I said, leadership is like a shadow. It's the result of the things we do. So, Jonas, you mentioned about the different practices you're using, the approach you have to include the full team, and so you were also speaking about that kind of change in leadership and change in opening up the practices that allow the full team to contribute. So I'm interested to hear a little bit more about this leadership and culture thing, because they're very, very fuzzy terms. A lot of people speak very ambiguously about what they actually mean. So I'm interested to hear from all of you, how does culture and leadership materialize in practice for you and your teams? If you have to explain to someone, how does this actually work in practice? What would you use as examples to illustrate it?
Okay,
So I think on my part, I really try to sort of influence the teams in their decisions as little as possible. And I've actually realized that it's actually better if I know less about the subject than they do, because then I'm sort of fully dependent on them, and that enforces the right behavior in me as well. And to be really concrete, I use something I call IIR, the issue impact recommendation. So whenever someone has a problem and comes to me, I first ask, what's the issue? Then have them explain the impact, and then ask for their recommendation for a solution on this. And most of the time I just go straight for what they recommended, because they know best. And I mean, why would I come up with a better solution than they do? And this way of sort of getting them into the mindset of solving the problems themselves is really good. And then they just end up asking me for some advice in it. And over time, they sort of develop so that when they face a problem, they directly start thinking about a solution, and most of the time solve it themselves rather than having to come to ask me at all. And I think that's really empowerment, where they when they can take the decision to solve the problems themselves?
I really like that answer, like building and fostering leadership on every level. And I'd like to add to that I think one of the key ingredients to enable that is to put the information that is needed to make good decisions to everybody's hand and make it like a really accessible and transparent, so people can make decisions and kind of lead themselves, as we are just people. Everybody is able to make decisions. What is lacking is most often the information.
I'm pretty much like the answers we already heard, but I want to add something regarding the culture, because for me it's a common misconception that culture is something you can manage top down or prescribe top down, like running around and saying, okay, we have I'll not say we have an open culture and this is it, so please be open now. Culture is, as well mentioned, is the shadow of a company. It's a reflection of the look and feel and the behavior of the employees, and all you can do to foster or to create a good and open culture is to provide the guidelines, so that they can all work in a free and creative and especially fearless environment. So on the other hand, especially for VW, having a long history of using a tight command and control structure, it's not that easy to make this transition, and it's especially not easy to find the right leaders for this type of culture that fit into the older structures. But I think that's part of the change we have here, and that's what makes it interesting, mixing the old command and control approach, the very classical approach, with all the new and agile ways of working that are absolutely necessary to achieve our goals.
How do you do this? How do you create that mix? Is it a mix that you create within one team, or you're looking to create
not within one team. That isn't going to work. But between different teams, different departments, so the business interfaces between them, they have to be clarified. Everyone has to be on the same page on what he's what he can expect from the other team. What about dates? What about confirmations on deliveries? And if you are on the same page, then it doesn't matter that far. If you, it doesn't really matter if you're in a classical project management approach with lots and lots of paperwork and lots of Gantt diagrams and tight controlling, or if you have teams that work pretty agile, when you're just confident enough that they will deliver their stuff. You just have to set the interfaces between those.
So for me as well, Saul here at Airbus. I mean, for me, it's kind of like about setting out that framework. I completely agree with what the other guys said about living the ways of working. So for leadership to sort of put out the sort of cultural framework, but then it's about living that culture. So there's some really good values within the sort of wider Airbus. So very sort of things like we are one, integrity, respect, customer focus, reliability, creativity. So, you know, in one sense, they're just words, but actually what we need to do is live towards those values now. And for me, the ways of working that we've been engaged, particularly since the Innovation Lab, is to adopt some of those agile methodologies and working practices. They actually align really well to those values. So when I talk about living that culture, it's like, well, yeah, you can see the bigger framework, but actually what we're doing here is helping us do this. We can see very clearly how we can, you know, drive that customer focus. And one of the things that the practice is, certainly in the discovery side and the engagement side, is that, you know, you're not reliant on individuals, or for example within our kind of service management team, which has really strong customer focus obviously, or key individuals, but actually we're all much more involved by this collaborative sort of set of practices that engage with customers and throughout the product life cycle as well. It's not just, we'll build this thing, but actually let's focus with our customers, build the right thing. And, the structure of some of those practices really, really helps. Whilst, Agile is about being flexible, having some discipline around those processes, make sure you do some of the discovery practices really, really helps us sort of live that culture.
Thanks, Sol. All of you have been on this kind of transformation journeys for a while. And I've personally been involved in my past leading transformations. And one thing I've realized is that it's as much a cultural or a transformation for the organization as it is for individuals, because essentially culture change requires behavior change. And that also leads to personal transformation for you as a leader. So I'm interested to hear, what have you changed your mind about in terms of leadership or culture or ways of working or behaviors after working with the Open Innovation Labs team and working closely with Red Hatters in the process? So what have you changed your mind about recently or after working with us about leadership and culture?
So for me, Saul, I'm not sure it's so much of changing my mind, but maybe just having my eyes opened to the way that we can achieve, what we're trying to do here, how we interact. Again, some of the user experience practices in particular has cemented that for me, that this approach is definitely the right way to go. And feeling that it's the right way to go is a great start into actually then delivering that sort of cultural change and transformation. So we found that being more open and engaged and increasing the visibility that brings in terms of what we're doing, how we're doing it, when we're doing it, and importantly, why we're doing it, which is what some of the guys have already kind of alluded to. It just breeds that sort of shared understanding and vision. So I think it's cementing that and having the tools to do that has been the key learning point for me.
To add to that, I think as someone mentioned before, like what it's really about is to make sure that the team has enough information, that you make sure to distribute that information and don't sit on it, even if you think that it's enough, that what, if the team has the knowledge, they can do even more with it. But then it's always a judgment call of not giving them too much information and not giving them too little. But overall, I would say when it comes to the why, then it's always good with more information to the team. That's where it gets most value, I would say.
And I think also like the environment and enabling environment where kind of a collaboration can really spark is a key. So you can take a kind of really dysfunctional team, bring lots of people from all over the world together, and in really quick fashion become a single unit if you take care of that process and you can facilitate it really well. So I think like we have a lot of potential in all the companies, all the enterprises, but we put really little effort to actually building teams. So I think that was one of the biggest eye openers, how fast you can actually do it if you put some effort behind it. And I think it's something that we all should do more.
Thanks, Antti. Well, it's interesting. A few of you used the terms open and sharing information with the team and basically allowing the team to drive the majority of the decisions by having open access to the information, to customers, to talking to real users. in open innovation labs, we speak a lot about open leadership, which is a big topic in its own for Red Hat as well. We would love to bring open leadership and the open organization principles to a lot more companies out there, to a lot more organizations. So having spoken about openness and open leadership yourself, or at least touching it in your answers, can you be a little bit more concrete? Can you give an example of how you experienced that open leadership through working with us, and how maybe you practice it with your teams? Just a bit more concrete.
Okay, so what I saw and experienced during the residency was that many people need to think about what leadership really does mean, and leadership is leading you to something valuable, not just being a hierarchical function like I'm the boss, you're going to do what I tell you attitude. In fact, we saw both during our residency, so and it became pretty obvious which was the best approach. Because if you're going to micromanage 12 worker units, then you're probably better at StarCraft. But in an agile environment or in an R&D environment, if you don't tell the people that they can take their own decisions, that you stick with their decisions, then it is going to make a huge mess for you, because you have to provide all the information that the team did to your interfaces, to your customers, and vice versa, and you have to funnel and filter everything, and it is just not going to work if the problem is too complex. And that's what we saw.
Thanks, Christian. Does anybody else want to add on top of this? Well, open leadership is a lot about meritocracy as well, allowing everyone to contribute. What was said, I think that practice you shared, Jonas, was amazing example of how you actually empower your teams. So I'm interested in how did you change your approach to developing people? And I mean all of you, or whoever wants to share from their experience. What do you do differently today to grow people in your teams?
I think there's one good story from really early on our residence that we did. We kind of realized that we are probably building the same wheel again, and maybe we shouldn't. And it was like one of the developers, but that was external, came like, Antti, I think we are not doing the right thing. We are probably wasting our time and money if we are going to follow the kind of initial plan that we came up with. And then we had a good long discussion, and I really encouraged that guy to really speak up the next day in the morning. I didn't want to kind of steal his spotlight to make it visible, but I really encouraged him to kind of challenge people that, hey, should we do this? Or should we probably rethink our approach? So I think it's about encouraging people and then supporting them. Because I really believe that all people have valuable perspectives into same problem that we are dealing. So how to kind of make them visible and get them out in the open is key ingredient.
Yeah, it's interesting you said doing the right thing or adding sufficient value, I would say. So we work a lot focused on the business outcomes, on the outcome over the output. And as you rightly pointed out, Antti, quite a lot of time, it all boils down in traditional organizations to what are we going to produce? What's the output? How many features and how many buttons? And it's a really big mind shift. It's a really big culture change to start focus more on business outcomes. So how does this culture change work for you? How does it reflect in concrete, tangible business outcomes in your experience?
Again, stealing the spotlight a bit, but I think it's how would say, what if you approach it from practices perspective? We found that, for instance, impact mapping is really kind of valuable and powerful tool to find out what we kind of assume that matters, and then trying to come up with a way how do we can kind of fastest validate that assumption. That is it really something that kind of makes an impact? And even before that, it's really important to set the stage by answering the question of why this is important kind of problem to solve, or why this is an important direction for us to go. And really going through that allows people to really focus on the outcomes and not the output. And it even happens even if you take kind of outside vendors into your team that get money from output. So it kind of changes the game, that we can focus on what we really need to do for our customers instead of what are the kind of nice and cool techie stuff that we can do.
Yeah, I would agree with that sentiment entirely, actually. And I think the impact mapping exercise was really quite an interesting one to start the journey with Red Hat. I think it asked some really leading and challenging questions, and ultimately it's all about, well, why? What are you trying to achieve here? But I think the whole change of the way we're working has flipped it to focus on those outcomes. And one of the most positive things for me is that I think every change that we've made, we can genuinely say that this is focusing on delivering better outcomes. Obviously for our customers, which is what we're trying to do, make them happy, deliver the value that they require, but also it has a positive impact for the staff and our leaders in turn, because everyone's focusing on the outcome, everyone has a clearer understanding of why we're doing things, people are happier in the work, people feel that they are delivering that value, which ultimately is what we all go to work for. We want to feel valued, we want to feel like we're making a difference. I think by focusing on those outcomes at all points in the process, it just helps build the sort of teams, build the knowledge, build the understanding, and that sort of continual improvement comes through again as well. So.
And to add to that, I think like the whole culture that we were infused with at the Innovation Lab sort of made us focus more on the team members and focus more on our way of working. I really like when you do that, when you really focus on the people and how they work together and make sure that they can continuously come with improvements so that they feel that they're more empowered and that they feel that they work in the best possible way. I mean, the outcomes comes always from that. You don't even need to focus on outcomes anymore. As long as you focus on the people, make sure that they are well informed and that they like the way they're working, you will get great business outcomes from it.
How do you measure this? A lot of leaders are actually struggling to put numbers behind these things, to measure the impact of change. We speak about DevOps culture, bringing together end-to-end teams that are having end-to-end responsibility, but it is quite often simply words and statements that are hard to measure. I know, Jonas, you've tried to actually put measures behind these things. Can you share a bit about this?
So we basically what we did was something called a metrics-based process mapping, and we measured basically seeing how the development process looked like before we started the labs and then after. I mean, we saw some extreme improvements in the numbers. I mean, we went from the point we have a new idea for something until that's running in production. We had a lead time of 37 weeks to get that out. And after the innovation labs, we had 6 weeks, and now we've even shortened it down to 5 weeks. So we continuously work with it, but like insane improvements there. And then if you look at the technology side of it, having CI/CD, having full automation, everything from the deployments to all of the test cases, all the way out to the UI, we've improved extremely much there as well. And that's really a big benefit for the developers, because before we had basically 4 weeks from the point that they had completed the code until it was verified and working, and that they could let that go and move on to the next story. And now with the new way of working, we have that confirmation after 1.5 hours. So from 4 weeks to 1.5 hours, that's over 100 times faster. But like if you look at it from a development side, if you write the code 4 weeks ago and then you have to go back to it today to look at it, then it takes some time to get into that mindset and understand how the code was written. If you made that commit 1.5 hours ago, you remember what you were thinking. I mean, you can compare that to an email chain or something, a long email chain. If you have to reply to something from 4 weeks back, it takes some time to write the next answer. You have to read through and understand what the conversation was about. If it was 1.5 hours ago, you just quickly write the reply right away. So I think they will have some really good numbers, and we have even more measurements, but I think those are some of the most crucial ones.
Yeah, and I can totally relate with that story. We also started with the value stream mapping and found out that it takes like 6 months to go from idea to production. And we kind of figured that, hey, we're like spending 246 hours in the work that creates value, kind of calendar time. So probably something needs to be changed. And we got kind of last year when we got last metrics out, or that I have access to, I think we got the time from doing a commit to getting change in production was something like 45 minutes. And previously, even that was taking always over 24 hours. It didn't make kind of any change if it was really urgent thing or not that urgent thing, but it was always a long process. And there was a lot of handovers to different teams. At least I think there was a handover to 3 different teams to get stuff into production. And after we did what we did, there was 0 handovers. Everything was contained in the one team, and the team could actually take the end-to-end responsibility of their product. Of course, they had a kind of backing platform to do a lot of their infrastructure concerns for them, but it really created a change. And when you can kind of own your thing fully, then you own your thing fully, and it creates engagement and pride and passion in your work, and that was really powerful.
Yeah. And a second note on the handovers there. I mean, one part is that you make it a lot faster when you go down to one team, because we actually went from a total of, like, the full process went from 8 teams to 1 team. And I mean, it's a lot of risk you reduce as well with removing the handovers. And I think another cool thing about actually putting the measurements and actually seeing what takes time in the process from the point you want to start development something until it's actually done, is that you see that the actual development isn't what takes the most time. It's the refinement and understanding by the BAs to understand exactly what we should build and what we shouldn't build. So it's really important to highlight that as well, to see that if we want to make this go faster, we should work on that end and not adding one more developer, because that it's not there. We have the bottleneck.
It was kind of interesting to hear from you that you all suffer the same problems with handovers and multiple teams working in an industrialized way, because in my experience, this is often rooted in companies that come from an industrialized way, and VW is obviously very industrialized in that way, and we have exactly the same issues by building our integration test benches, which right at the moment need, I think, 8 or 9 handovers between several teams, and even back and forth between the same teams, to just create one product, the integration test bench. So we saw a huge impact from the innovation lab side on this too. Just in the thinking about the process and streamlining it and cutting down the handovers and putting more responsibility to teams. you wouldn't have the initial idea to put more responsibility to, because they are right now completely underwater. You're getting faster if you give them not just small singled out work packages, but actually the responsibility for something. And I just can second all of you. That's exactly the right way to do it.
Sounds like we are moving in the direction of how do you scale culture. The Open Innovation Labs residencies, for those who are listening and do not know, is an immersive experience where we try to actually work together, mixing people from our customers with our own engineers from Red Hat, because we simply found out that this is the best way to let teams experience a different culture and experience different ways of working, and at the same time build something meaningful, something challenging. But that is just one team. You're putting one of your teams, and all of you have went through this. You started with one team in an Open Innovation Labs residency. You experienced something different as a way of working, as behaviors, as culture, and ways of using technology to build products. But then you had that challenge. I think all of you had that challenge to bring that culture change to even more teams. So how did that work? How did you trigger that change outside of your single team to impact the bigger organization?
During the residency, I've learned a lot about different methods, and especially the importance of having extensive onboarding for a team, and that's what I'm currently using in my day-to-day work. We have lots of new teams because the year has changed, there are new contracts out, so we have lots of teams that we need to onboard to get up to speed, and that really fast. So my colleagues that weren't in the Innovation Lab, they were a bit skeptic, taking 1 or even 2 days to onboard the new teams, to tell them everything, to tell them the bigger scope of what they are doing and who they are talking to and stuff like that. And I'm actually seeing the benefits because they are getting independent very fast. The teams are able to ask the right questions. They are able to get to the right people instead of waiting for their product owner or waiting for their specified customer to help them. Really works quite well.
Jonas, I know you scaled to quite a few teams, and that is similar to the challenges that Sol has in his organization. How did that work for you? How did you expose more people to the different way of working that you achieved with your team after the residency?
Yeah, I think, the main thing has been, as I mentioned earlier, that we've shown it to a lot of people, and we have really set a mark in our organization because people see that there is something different with this team. You can see it physically because they're still surrounded by post-its everywhere, but also the level of engagement of the team and how they speak to other teams when someone needs help. I think that's really cool, and the whole mindset in the team that they don't expect someone else to solve something. They know that they're responsible, and they make sure to solve it themselves. They don't expect someone else to solve their problem. So whenever someone comes with a problem to them, the first thing to go to is actually try to solve it together. I think that's really cool. And I've now moved into the role of PM and taken over 7 different teams, and it is all about showing the good examples from the old team. And the team has been mentioned so many times as a good example in the company. So I think that has been helping a lot as well. We have a saying in the team that we build it, we run it, we love it. And I think that's sort of telling for the team, and that kind of enthusiasm, it just spreads. I think.
And you're kind of really open and welcoming to other teams to come visit and essentially walk the walls, which is what we see on those photos. Actually, you're walking the walls with few people, which I've seen also Antti do how do you feel about that approach? How much inspiration and a spark for change does it create?
Yeah, I think that's actually really cool because I've done, I don't know how many walk the walls I've done now, and like after maybe 10 or 20 of them, I sort of feel like, yeah, I've been saying the same kind of stuff over and over again. So myself, I don't see it as that sort of, I feel like the magic is gone for me. Like this is the standard. This is like the baseline, how we work. But you see at the end of those walk the walls, the questions you get and like the enthusiasm in the eyes of the people you have talked to, that they are still getting really impacted by doing this. So I think that's a really great way to spread this way of working.
Yeah, I think that's a really good example. Actually, we've done something similar. One of the things we did when we came back from the lab was to try and keep things as close as possible to the lab. So there was a temptation to sort of, move quickly into sort of digital solutions for some of the more physical practices that are done in the lab, but we were very adamant that we wanted to keep to that sort of physical interaction, making it all about that sort of people and interaction with whiteboards and post-it notes. I mean, we do get joked about a lot in terms of the number of post-its we have, but it really is a way to facilitate that sort of collaboration and team. And walking the walls is something that's worked really well. We've actually done it with some of our wider teams across Europe as well now, and the sort of synergies between what we're doing and some of the larger programs. So they run scaled agile framework programs, but doing what we're doing has allowed us to sort of have the conversation and facilitate some of that integration more. I mean, when we got back from the lab, we had to onboard new team members to come into the team, and then ultimately expand into multiple teams as well. So the onboarding process is a significant time commitment. But I think seeing how things work in those sort of collaborative spaces, and as Jonas referred to there, this is how we work now. Taking that as the standard helps people to be infused by seeing that. And you're right, you genuinely do see some of the stuff that you begin to take for granted, because this is how we do now work, is really quite encouraging for people coming into the team and actually working with a sort of multidisciplinary team. So I remember in the lab we had one of our senior architects who's been with Airbus for sort of 20 years plus now, just saying, wow, this is actually the first time in 20 years that I've been discussing these sort of problems with a mix of business and technical staff in the same room. And it's that kind of culture and engagement that we're really trying really hard to keep going when we came back from the lab, which has been really positive.
I think one thing to keep in mind though on doing these walk the walls is that you pique a lot of interest. And I've ended up facilitating impact mappings, event stormings for a lot of other teams. So like your time gets, your calendar gets stretched quite thin to be able to cope with that. Because once you start facilitating for other teams, that takes a lot of time. But that's also a really good way of spreading when they have tried it out really for themselves in the teams, they continue with it. So I think that's one of the keys as well. And that's really good about the Innovation Lab, that we learned how to do it with the team, but we also sort of learned how to facilitate. That has been something that me and the Scrum Master from the team, Olivia, has been doing a lot for other teams as well.
There's one thing I would like to add to the walk the wall method, because for us, the major tip or the major improvement on this is don't take anything for granted because you think everyone has the same understanding. Put it down, write it down, discuss it, and just what's on the wall is the truth, and everything the people have in their minds are thinking about and not speaking out to it, you can't rely on it. Just you really need to make sure that everyone has the same understanding, is on the same side, has the same interpretation of a technical spec or of a requirement, and that's basically what Walk the Wall is fostering, and that worked for us quite good.
Wow, there's so much to unpack and dive deeper in this conversation. So many more material for future conversations, which I think we should definitely do. But we need to leave some time for questions from the audience. And so one last question. If you were to go back in time and talk to yourself before you decided to embark on this journey, this adventure, engaging with Open Innovation Labs in a residency, how would you describe the experience you're about to go through?
I think, first of all, I would say intense. I mean, we did 6 weeks, and I think I've never done anything remotely similar to that kind of experience. And also, I mean, be open. Don't expect it to be a regular training. It's not so much about acquiring knowledge. It's more of sort of changing your mindset on how to think and how to approach things. And also, I mean, technology is a part of it, but it's not really centered around the technology. The focus is around how to work together and how to approach challenges and how to the workshops and other things. And I mean, really, that's actually the most valuable knowledge you can have in a company. Because I mean, technology will come and go. Kubernetes is really cool right now, but I mean, so was virtual machines back in the day. So at some point, so I think that's what I would say.
Yeah, for me, I would also reiterate the word intense. We also did 6 weeks. It was an incredibly intense, but rewarding, very rewarding, challenging, but also fun. We should emphasize the word fun. Really, I think it's how people thrive when they're in an environment like that. Certainly brought a lot of our people together. It gave us a clear sense of direction and understanding of how we can move forward together, which is fantastic. I think the combination of technical and cultural is I think probably I was thinking it's going to be more technical, and actually it was the cultural value that we got from this. So definitely opening your eyes to new ways. So don't come in with too many fixed ideas. Prepare to be challenged. Feel free to challenge. Be prepared to be asked why. Why all the time is great. It's key throughout the process. And also probably just as a more practical thing to think about the transition from the lab as early as possible. You kind of don't necessarily know from the outset what you need to know, but thinking about how this plays out back in the office is key. And the more you can do up front to prepare that landscape, the better, I'd say. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say that like be prepared to be inspired and build on top of ideas of others. I think that was the most kind of major thing that we experienced, that we really improved our ideas by exploiting other people's ideas and making them better. And I really back what you're saying, like be planning homecoming early enough. There's a story there, but let's leave it at another time.
Yeah, we tried to do this already in the pre-work to start planning for what happens next.
For me, if I would go back in time and give me a tip, I would say it's very important that you get rid of everything that is hindering your immersion into the innovation lab. You should really treat it not like exactly like a vacation, but like 2 or 3 months of planned absence, where you transfer your responsibilities to deputies or to someone else, so that you really can focus on the innovation lab and dive in and be there, and not treat it like just another project on top.
Thanks, Christian. Really, really good words. I think this is very consistent feedback with what I've heard from many other people that have went through that experience. In the pre-work, it's kind of really easy to underestimate the impact this would have on teams and the organization. And the earlier we start planning the transition, the better. There's a lot of practices behind, and the good thing is all of those or most of those are actually documented in openpracticelibrary.com. All of the people who are listening can actually go and read a bit more about what is metric-based process mapping or impact mapping, or how do you showcase to more teams and more people in your organization what you're doing? We're trying to document this, to share this, and encourage all of our customers to contribute there. Unfortunately, we're out of time, well ahead of time. It was super interesting conversation. I think we need to do it again. But now we have to wrap up and maybe take a couple of questions from the audience. Thank you very much for taking the time today, guys. I'm looking forward to more stories coming from you.
Okay. Hello. Wow. That was really fantastic to get your insight there and experience. So, hi, I'm Chris Bainham-Hughes, by the way. So I'm a client innovation advocate for Open Innovation Labs across EMEA. So I just really enjoyed listening to that back. Really inspiring. We're running a touch close to the wire time-wise, so I'm going to dive straight into a couple of questions. I think if we finish up with 2 questions from the floor, and then the rest we'll sort of try and deal with after. So Anna Jones has asked, how has this approach encouraged innovation?
And I can give an example from my side, what we have done when it comes to innovation. And I think really what we learned is like the innovation should happen in the teams, not somewhere else. So one approach we have taken to it, instead of doing these regular sort of innovation weeks, that's part of the SAFE framework, I've instead said to the team, okay, you get 48 hours, do whatever you want, no limitations whatsoever. The only thing I ask in return is that after these 2 days, you present to the team what you have learned or what you have done, and that's basically it. And I mean, what we want is them to work with something that either enhances their skill or brings the product forward, but that's all we say, and then we give them completely free and open to what they want. And that's worked really well. Really cool stuff has come out from that.
Awesome.
Yeah, so for me as well, specifically within the sort of connected intelligence area where I work, the lab itself was an integral part of our innovation drive. So we're now building on from that, aligning our innovation program much more closely now to our sort of portfolio and strategy, and continuing to use some of those practices that we sort of cemented in the lab. And ultimately, those sort of process improvements that we made allow us to sort of focus on our areas of expertise and develop, innovative solutions and be more responsive rather than getting bogged down, say, in infrastructure, for example. And also really allowing us to have that focused engagement earlier on with our customers, so that we start to develop the ideas and solutions together. So much more in that kind of co-creation mode, which obviously ultimately means that we have a better chance of building the right thing, as well as just building the thing right.
Yeah, that's so important.
Exactly.
You don't really. It's one of those things that is difficult to quantify the actual benefit that brings of actually building the right thing in the first place, because you don't know what you would have cost you to build the wrong thing, right? So, yeah, really interesting. Anthony, have you got anything to add?
Yes, I think if you kind of expose the team to customers and the real users and make them feel empathy towards them and make them be able to own their own destiny, it sparked this kind of idea, hey, we should do this better because, hey, our customers are not kind of a feeling that what we've been doing in a way or is kind of optimal for them, or maybe these pre-made plans are not kind of fixing the real issue, so maybe we should do that. So the innovation starts to happen on kind of daily basis, and it doesn't need to be a big thing that you do in some kind of innovation lab, but it can be really small things that you do every day, and which build up into a really big ball of innovation.
Yeah, absolutely. That idea that innovation is something that completely changes the world overnight it's not an accurate one. It's the small changes and small things that really make it. Awesome. Fantastic. Great to get your insight there. I think if we move to the second question, Bernard asked, well, I'm going to paraphrase his question slightly, but how do you deal with people that are skeptical of the approach? Those doubters that have a legacy mindset and may well own the systems that you're working with or you're trying to interact and trying to change. And have you had to hire massively to drive and achieve the change that you've made?
So for me, the short answer to is no. You don't have to hire massively. You don't change your working system because you like change and because you like the cost of change and the time that is involved, but because you have a need and you have a pressure to change. And all the doubters and the ones with the legacy mindset, you have to tell them, you have to be open to them why you need the change. And then it's basically all about taking their personal fears into account and what is changing with the new way of working, and maybe enhanced transparency and stuff like that. You have to take their needs into account. You have to talk to them and you have to guide them through the transformation. And we made very good progress on this way, and we definitely don't have to hire massively in that way.
Exactly, and it's quite easy to find people that are really open to make things better, and even in the kind of the depths of infrastructure and several people, we managed to find a couple of guys that really wanted to do kind of right for the customer, and they really wanted to change the way that they are approaching product development and technology as a whole. So it was super easy to find kind of already inspired and willing people to join the initial team. And we didn't hire anybody new. Maybe we should have hired people to fill the kind of old positions, as you still kind of need to keep the lights on and keep the system running that currently makes you money. But you should really pick the people from your old organization, because it's kind of a reward to get to do something new, and you shouldn't hire people to do new stuff, but maybe do the old stuff and then after that graduate towards the new way of working.
Yeah, I agree. It's exactly the opposite from having to hire new people. So some of our people were ready for change. Some of them have been staying for a while. We need to change, and actually this was a real commitment from the business, really, to invest, to show investment in our people. So it was much more about allowing them to flourish, I suppose, by giving them the right tools and the right environment and the right way of working, so that they could actually develop themselves and start to use some of the more cutting edge tools and technologies and practices that really they've been hankering after for a while, in all honesty. So I think it's much more showing the commitment to your existing staff, and taking that transformation is much more important than hiring new staff.
Yeah, and again, having these inspiring stories, you've got all these, you've proved it, really. You've proved the method in that sense. So yeah, brilliant. I mean, I could easily spend another hour talking with you guys, and thanks to everybody who's contributed online, because we've got enough questions to do another hour, I think. But yeah, I mean, it's really inspiring hearing your stories. Alas, we are over time, so it's just left for me to say a huge thank you to you all for being our panel today and sharing your stories so openly. There's more questions than we have time for, so we'll try to follow up on as many of these as we can. And thank you to everyone listening for your contributions. We hope you found it useful. The recording will be made available if you want to listen again, or you want to enable friends or encourage colleagues to check it out. And if you'd like to find out more about what it would be like to work with us, then please get in touch with me. We always look forward to hearing from our customers, so it'd be great to hear from you. So thanks again, and have a wonderful day.